Welcome back to Papal Profiles, where we examine the most powerful and controversial figures in church history. This episode dives into the most controversial pope of the past century, Pius XII. Pius XII was pope during World War II, and a man whose legacy has been plagued by one central question: why did he remain silent during the Holocaust? To understand Pius XII, we need to begin before his papacy, when he was still Eugenio Pacelli. In 1933, as Cardinal Secretary of State, he signed the Reichskonkordat with Nazi Germany. In theory, it guaranteed the rights of the Catholic Church. In practice, it required the Church to withdraw from political opposition, silencing Catholic criticism of the Nazi regime in exchange for limited religious freedoms. It was not an isolated arrangement. The Vatican had already struck a similar deal with fascist Italy. The pattern was clear: preserving the institutional power and privileges of the Church at all costs, even if it meant compromising with authoritarian regimes. By the late 1930s, Pacelli's predecessor, Pope Pius XI, had grown increasingly frustrated with this totalitarian counterparts in Italy and Germany, and the spiraling antisemitism. He secretly commissioned an encyclical condemning Nazi racial ideology and prepared a speech denouncing fascism outright. But in one of history's most tragic turning points, he died the day before he planned to deliver it, on the anniversary of the signing of the Vatican's treaty with Italy. What followed was decisive. Pacelli, soon to be Pope Pius XII, ordered the destruction of the speech and suppressed the encyclical entirely, ensuring it would never be released. From the outset of his papacy, Pius XII chose diplomacy over confrontation. Drawing on the detailed archival research of David Kurtzer in The Pope at War, made possible by the Vatican archives opened under Pope Francis in 2020, we now have a clearer picture of that decision-making. Pius feared provoking Hitler and risking further reprisals against Catholics, especially given the repeated violations of the Reichskonkordat. He also viewed Nazi Germany as a bulwark against the Soviet communists, which the Church considered an existential threat. In that context, Pius pursued quiet diplomacy, halting Vatican criticism of the Nazis, engaging in secret negotiations, and maintaining public neutrality as the war unfolded. Yet the Vatican was not operating in ignorance. Newly opened archives reveal that the Pope received detailed reports about the persecution and extermination of Jews across Europe. Clergy, diplomats, and envoys repeatedly urged him to speak out. He did not. The closest he came was in his 1942 Christmas radio address. The strongest commentary Pius could bring himself to utter was buried more than 20 pages into his speech and made no direct mention of the victims or those inflicting the harm, but simply alluded to the hundreds of thousands of people who, through no fault of their own and solely because of their nation or their race, have been condemned to death or progressive extinction. In their respective reports, two diplomats noted that Pius was upset that his veiled denunciation of the Holocaust was unsatisfactory to those who had called upon him to speak out. Post-war Catholic apologists tried to claim that this speech was indeed a ringing papal denunciation. The most striking moment came in October 1943. As Nazi forces rounded up over 1,000 Jews in Rome, within sight of the Vatican, Pius XII was informed as events unfolded. He knew what was happening and what fate awaited them. Yet he made no public protest. The Vatican intervened only to secure the release of Jews who had converted to Catholicism and those in mixed marriages. The rest were deported to death camps. Even within the Church, this silence provoked unease, with some clergy describing it as a crime of silence and others admitting they could no longer defend the Vatican's neutrality. To be clear, individual Catholics did act. Some hid Jews in monasteries, convents, and other church properties. But these were local, independent decisions, not the result of any universal directive from the Pope. Throughout the war, Pius XII's priority remained consistent: protecting the Church at the cost of its moral authority. After the war, that same priority shaped the Vatican's narrative. The Church moved quickly to distance itself from fascism, despite years of documented cooperation, emphasizing Catholic suffering while largely ignoring the destruction of European Jewry. As Kurtzer notes in The Pope at War, the post-war period became a time for forgetting, not just for the Church, but for much of Europe. The opening of the Vatican archives has only intensified the debate. They reveal a Pope who was informed, cautious, and deeply concerned with preserving the Church's position, but unwilling to take a clear moral stand against one of history's greatest crimes. So how should we judge Pope Pius XII? Was he a pragmatic leader navigating an impossible situation, or a moral authority who failed when the world needed him most?
Thanks for watching. Please check out the other videos on my channel if history is your thing, and see you next time.